Hi, everyone. This is Greg Airel from Fulfill.com, and we're continuing our series on interviewing logistics leaders in the industry. Today, we have another Greg Moser from ShipCalm. So, Greg, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing great, Greg. Yeah, thanks for having me on today.
Awesome. We're very excited to talk to you and learn more about ShipCalm. And really, I just want to start from the beginning here. So, can you tell me the story behind ShipCalm? Like, what sparked that idea or led you to where you are today?
Well, it's interesting. It sort of, I would say, came out of two ideas, myself and a co-founder of mine. I'll do it from his perspective. At least I think at the beginning, he was running a contract manufacturing business. So think assembling 3,000 little electronics pieces onto a circuit board and soldering those together and then, assembling that into a product. And he was doing that here where we founded the business in Southern California, specifically San Diego, North County, San Diego. And, electronics contract manufacturing is a very hard business. He assemble 1,000 pieces onto a circuit board and, carry all that inventory along the way. And at the end, he'd make like a 20-cent profit on whatever that widget was. And he was starting to do this increasingly more and more for e-commerce companies. And when he was done with it, he was shipping it off to some, e-commerce fulfillment center that was charging $2 to just put a label on it and ship it out the door, and was like, I'm in the wrong business. Got to get into another business. And so he was starting that journey when I met him. And I was coming out of a software business where I had built and scaled a e-commerce software platform for mid-market and enterprise scale companies. And I was looking at getting into running a portfolio of emerging consumer brands. So I had tracked down 5 different emerging consumer brands that I had invested in and was working on growing and scaling, mostly on the sales and marketing side and trying to drive revenue there. And I met my co-founder Ted and saw what he was doing and was like, wow, this sort of operations platform that you're contemplating here is something that I certainly need, certainly something that I think is going to be valuable to folks. And so why don't we partner up? And that's sort of where it started back in 2017. So yeah, that's what was birthed out of a need of our own self-interest, I would say.
Right. And a love of technology, it sounds like, between the both of you as well. And, I want to just move on now to the next part of technology. And in a competitive landscape, it sounds like you guys are sort of technology focused. So, what makes ShipCalm truly unique, against we both know this, there's a ton of 3PLs. It seems like a new one pops up every single day. So, what makes you guys truly unique versus maybe some of the others out there?
I mean, I think that there's a number of aspects when it comes to 3PLs. I mean, there's a number of things that make us unique and, specifically speaking to the technology portion that you're asking about, I would say that pretty much every 3PL uses technology in some way, shape, or form, right? That's not new or different. But there is this kind of feeling that you get when you're working with a company that has a software system that's, running on Windows, that's been around for ages, that may not be maybe cloud centric or cloud native. I think we saw in sort of the mid-teens and now many more kind of modern software tech stack sort of businesses that say, hey, we use modern tools and we're trying to use more cloud-based software and we're trying to really kind of reinvent what a customer experience can feel like, more transparency, more visibility, more data, more clear, real-time inventory or whatever it is. So there's kind of been this wave of tech forward 3PLs over the last 10 years, e-commerce fulfillment providers over the last 10 years. And they've really been riding this wave of, is it modern? Is it an easy UI to work with, et cetera? And I would say that probably because of my background coming from more of the sort of Silicon Valley software world, we felt that way from day one, right? We felt like we were using modern tools, we were connecting them in ways that were modern, and we were building software ourselves that was what you sort of expect out of a Shopify era, which is really kind of what I think of as a North Star in the sort of world of SaaS. That was how we got started. And, what's interesting is that right now I would say that we are really excited about reinventing ourselves as an AI native organization, which is kind of a whole nother leap in sort of technical advancement. I believe that in our industry, we are the absolute front runner as far as being AI native and leveraging AI tools and technology. I would put us sort of toe to toe with anybody on that argument. And I think that we're going to see a wave of transition. And in fact, some of those sleek sort of Shopify looking companies from the last 10 years are probably in the next 24 months going to start to feel outdated again, which is going to be a little weird, but I think we're going through one of those transitions.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit more about this AI focus. Like, what does that look like at ShipCalm today, like in implementation and how your customers are using it? And then tell me a little bit about where it's going. Like, where is this going to take us? Because as you said, this is a rapidly changing environment, so there's things that exist today, and with AI, they're going to look very different tomorrow. So would love to hear your thoughts and how ShipCalm is approaching that today.
That's a good question. And I think it's a complicated one because there is varying degrees of adoption of sort of AI tools to help, operate, whether that's your personal life or your business better. I would say the first wave of this for us is ShipCalm has had to go through its own sort of internal AI transformation. And in the beginning, what that looked like was don't send me that report until you've run it through ChatGPT first, or don't fire off that email until you've run it through ChatGPT. That's kind of like the 0.001 of reinventing yourself. It's just like, how does the organization actually leverage these tools? And there's been a lot of learning in that sort of environment. But I think it's pretty safe to say now that we're firm believers, because I now see it in the way that our organization operates internally, that a lot of the old or the current software systems, there's a WMS you need to log into, or there's an order management system that you need to log into, or there's a finance system that you need to log into, and or project management tool. And you log in and you go check a status, or you update a drop down field, or you reassign something to somebody. There's a lot of, I log into a tool, I orient myself to that tool, I click buttons and widgets, and then that saves my intentions into a database somewhere, right? Well, I think we are moving pretty quickly to the world of AI coworkers, where work gets done just fundamentally differently. And there is no need for those screens anymore for you to log in and hit the drop down and change the project status, or update the address, or change the whatever, but really that these things can and should be done more conversationally with AI agents in everyday life, in sort of a human and AI working together, just like they were a coworker in any way, shape, or form. And so that's what we're building at ShipCalm, right? We built this sort of AI coworker mindset with a coworker named Marvin that not only has access to all of our systems, but can connect to any of your systems with whatever proprietary information you have and keep that safe and secure, can solve problems outside of what you're, doing with us. And so, yeah, we are now giving away sort of that AI coworker experience to all of our customers. And that's all very new for us, but it's exciting because it's taking things and really accelerating them, especially on the front of complex problem solving. It's not replacing, it doesn't make my order pickers pick faster, like that, there's a whole bunch of robotics and other things that are happening in the warehouse floor for that. That's not really what I'm talking about. Really, where we're seeing the biggest leverage and reinventing ourselves is more just how teams operate, to make decisions, to analyze data, to solve problems. Can we accelerate those things that are always like, "Ah, I know I need to get to that thing on my to-do list, but like it's going to be so painful for me to do that analysis. I'm not sure I want to." So that's really what we're doing here, is really arming our customers with tools that are just actual major competitive advantages for them against their competitors. That's what we're in the business with, is arming our customers with the right tools.
Yeah, and I think that's a cool thing that you guys are introducing here because, like you mentioned, you have your WMS, you have all these systems, and a lot of brand owners just really have to dig into that data themselves to understand it. Where it sounds like what you're building at ShipCalm is you can ask, the AI to sort of do it for you Marvin and get that information out so you don't have to go and dig through reports, inventory forecasts, how many sales did I have in X amount of days with SKU number Y. That all takes our time and it's tedious and nobody likes doing it. So it seems like you've completely removed that piece and just made it a conversational tool where brands can really focus on building and not necessarily digging into reports.
Yeah, and I think that that was the first layer that we did was, hey, all of our data is here, and so you can talk to an LLM and it'll give you back the questions that you ask it. And where we really are now is, it's showing up saying like, what should I be focused on today? Not like, oh, I need to understand my inventory numbers for blah blah blah. It's more starting your day with, hey boss, I know, hey boss, awareness. I think we're going to stock out of this thing, or hey boss, awareness, this person in this department at your company was talking to this marketing thing and I think you might need to get involved, or whatever those things are. Way more in a proactive, like a coworker would come to you and say, hey, I think this is what you should be doing today, or we should be having this conversation. And that's like the next layer of excitement around this stuff is it's not just, help me get my job done better, but tell me what I should be doing, and some of those things. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. It feels very proactive, getting ahead of any potential problems by sort of presenting you with information and also with, I think, growth capabilities too, just by having those questions and outreach coming to the brand of like, what do I need to look at now to get to the next level?
And I think like, there are things like it's not just for the stuff that we're doing, right? One of the benefits of having a tool like Marvin is you can say, "Hey Marvin, I want to break into B2B. Go out and build me a database of all of the buyers in B2B across these categories. You know what our products are, so rank this by the buyers that you think are going to be most likely and most receptive to a pitch from us. Craft us that pitch. You have a research assistant at your disposal that's on 24/7 that can build databases and do cold outreach for you, and whatever you ask him to do, he'll do all of those tasks, right? So it's really cool when you give that kind of horsepower to a founder, which is, really what we're in the business of, is like, how do we give you as much horsepower as possible? And yeah, it's cool. It's really been a lot of fun.
It's really interesting to see this come out of a 3PL too, because like you sort of see all these standalone tools. And, when you think about 3PL, you think about, and this just is what it is in the industry. Like you put a label on a box and it goes out the door. You have a physical warehouse. Like you're not thinking of like brand growth and having these AI integrated tools readily available. And it seems like, yes, you have the core of what is needed for the physical aspects of a warehouse and functioning, but you also bring on this value added service to help brands grow within your ecosystem. And yeah, do you have any other, value added services like that? Because I do find it really interesting that yes, there's the core business model, but you have all these extra value added services that usually brand owners need to go get a one-off solution for.
So we certainly do, right? I think this gets at the core of what is most differentiated about us versus anybody else that you would think of on the 3PL space. So it's important to note that ShipCalm doesn't think of itself as a 3PL. We do everything that a 3PL does. So we certainly do all of that. But 3PL for us is a bit of a subset of what we really offer as a value proposition to customers. And that means that we're not for everybody, actually, right? And when I explain the value proposition, maybe that'll make more sense. If you're Nike and you're just looking for a 3PL that will, you've shipped 1 trillion shoes in your history and you know how to put labels on every shoe perfectly, and you've got 16 other 3PLs that you're working with, and you want to, get that shoe shipped for cost plus five or whatever it is, right? ShipCom's not for you. That's really not the business that we're in. We do 3PL, but we specifically do 3PL for emerging consumer brands where we actually offer a broader service that we call 3PO, third party operations. And what that means is that we are fully staffed up and capable of operating almost like a marketing agency or outsourced financial services company, like an outsourced CFO. But we offer this outsourced 3PO offering where we will provide director of operations, supply chain management, call center management, kind of the totality of what does it take to actually run an emerging consumer brand. And instead of me going out and trying to find or cobble together a team or put a bunch of stuff on my brother-in-law who's never done this before or whatever it is and try to get them to learn, some of these things, we have gone out and we've hired professionals that have years of experience in the industry. They've grown and scaled consumer brands before. They know that the software systems that a consumer brand uses when it's a $1 million consumer brand versus a $50 million are different, right? There's different time. When do we need to roll out that software? So we provide kind of that fractional CTO, the fractional COO, all of the tech recommendations, all of the operational recommendations. We set up the systems so that this thing can run itself versus, okay, it's on you guys to set up your operations and we're just a little cog in that wheel. We really come in and take an active approach. But what that means is that we focus on brands that tend to be between 2 and 50 million in revenue. I tend to say 2 and 20 because that's really the stage that I love getting involved in. These are brands that are running into all sorts of challenges, but it's exciting. It's really exciting
Right.
because the brand is growing and there's a lot of opportunity, and Target is calling and saying, we want to stock this on their shelves for, back to school or whatever it is. And so if this is a consumer brand that is in that phase, man, can we make your life easier and better? And man, can I really help you get from, 2 to 100 way quicker than if you do it on your own. And for us, I firmly believe that in doing that, our professional services come in and help do that. But one of the things they're going to bring with them is an AI native strategy, right? Because in order to do those things, you do need to be using the absolute latest and greatest and best, and you need to stay competitive.
Awesome. Yeah, that's such an interesting solution too, especially for that 2 to 50 million stage brand entrepreneur that is like, how do I get this thing to the next level? That's what I hear a lot from a lot of those brands on how to figure that out. And it seems like you have that full package there. And I would love just to hear like a winning story of a brand that you guys have worked with where you have found that success through using your methodologies and techniques and services.
I think one of the brands that I'm most proud of here is a company called BioHarvest. They're really innovative technology. They've developed some, wellness products that they sell. And we got started with BioHarvest. I think, I don't want to say we shipped their first order, but nearly their first order, right? We got set up really early with them and they're now a publicly traded company on NASDAQ. Right. And in fact, it's a company is based headquartered out of Israel. And, one of these exceptional leaders that we had on our team, now we really built out their infrastructure and, grew with them and did this whole thing to a point where, it went from being, hey, we need somebody in fractional capacities to help us figure these things out to, oh my gosh, we have gotten so big and we are getting up into those larger scale things where the original point person on that account for us ended up going to work in house because it got so big. We still work with them. The teams now work seamlessly, but it's like, oh, this is going to this is a dedicated thing and they need to be in house for you. But for us, that's really exciting, right? When you can be a meaningful part of a founder's journey. I mean, I got on the call and sold the founder on day one, right? Before he was the CEO of a publicly traded company. It wasn't a publicly traded company, right? And to be a part of that journey and solving those problems along the way. And in a way where they really have leaned on us from the get to, make recommendations and deal with complicated FDA things and other aspects of the business. That's been really rewarding. That's a great example of somebody that we get a lot of enjoyment out of working with.
Yeah, what a cool story. I mean, from going to order number one to publicly traded is no small feat. So to have a partner like ShipCalm, with you every step of the way, I think it just speaks to, the services that you guys can provide.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time, Greg. It was great talking to you. If you're looking for a tech-enabled 3PL or a 3PO, ShipCalm is where you need to go. So thanks for the time today, Greg.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated this. This was a great conversation, and thank you for everything you do for our industry. The work you guys do is really important and meaningful, and I appreciate your, mission to connect brands with the right fit for them. So keep doing the work you guys are doing because it's needed.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Greg. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
All right, thanks.